Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is Tips and Tools on TherapyCable.com, and I'm Dr. Carlos, behavioral psychologist, with co-host Dr. G.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gharadjedaghi, also known as Dr. G, clinical psychologist. We welcome to our Tips and Tools on addiction today.
That's right. We're going to be talking about addiction. This is actually starting to wrap up a little bit the series that we've done on addiction. We're going to get into more specifics next time. We're going to start talking more about medications and other things. But I know today we're going to look at a lot more about the solutions and how we can help other people. We'll talk about intervention. But the first question right off the get-go, which I think a lot of people are wondering is, can you get rid of addiction, or is it only really manageable?
Very good.
I know some people say, I think we've talked about this in the previous show, 12 steps will say, no, once you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic. And we had that discussion last week. So I'll start off with that. Can you get rid of an addiction forever?
Very good. That's a good question. So let's address that in a little bit of a more, deeper sense and meaning, what it means. In general, I would say, yes, you can get rid of addiction. But it's not as easily said like that, completely getting rid of addiction, because if you have watched one of our previous videos, you know when we say addiction, it's more or less a term used for a very specific type of habit formation. So if we replaced that word addiction with what it really is, which is habit formation, right? Then it becomes a little bit more clear how difficult it is to just say yes to that question. Yes, you can get rid of it. Because then the question becomes, well, how can we get rid of habits? Well, we can't necessarily get rid of habits in general, because, I may be habituated and have developed certain habits toward a certain, way of dressing, right? Dressing up for occasions, or dress code, if you will, and then replace that. But does that mean I'm getting rid of the ability of forming habits in general, or no?
Good point.
Right, so I may continue my habits in, for instance, the way I'm brushing my teeth. Right, so that's a habitual format too, or driving somewhere. A lot of people habitually drive to work or to a specific place that they're used to. That's habit too. They have formed that habit, and just because they stop dressing up in a certain way, they got rid of that habit of dress code, doesn't mean they also get rid of their habits or ability to form and maintain habits in another area of their life. So are we talking about, when we are saying, can we stop addiction? Can we get rid of addiction? Are we talking about specifically stopping a very specific set of habits as it relates to, for instance, substance use? Yes, we can.
So if you're addicted to cocaine,
right,
and let's say I am, and I'm done. I've come out of treatment. I haven't had it for months and months and months.
Right.
So is it possible for me to live the rest of my life
cocaine free?
Cocaine free?
Absolutely. It is possible. Now, not by mere chance. That's the caveat I would throw in.
What do you mean?
Well, basically, the way you said it is, if I have used and then by mere chance, how did you stop? How long did you stop? What do you have? What kind of tools do you have to explain the time of your sobriety, how you maintained the sobriety? Was it happening because you stranded on an island with no cocaine? And you're saying, okay, I lived on 2 years on that island, therefore I didn't use. Okay, so now I decided not to use anymore and I'm okay with it. Well, it was by chance. You stranded on that island for 2 years. There was no availability of cocaine. There was no access to cocaine. It wasn't because you were capable of staying away from cocaine. These are two different things. So we have to really address more or less skill set, mindset, skill set, in addition to all the other factors, which would be, let's say, biological factors, environmental factors, familial factors, social factors, economic factors. We have to assess the whole situation. So can we get rid, can people in general who get addicted to, let's say, let's just stay with the topic of cocaine. Can they get rid of it? Yes, if they have a plan, if they have received treatment, if they have gone through a more or less a training. What is treatment? It's retraining your mind and body and soul and emotions to use a series of skills that you either didn't know about before, or you knew but you didn't know how to implement that knowledge to your life in a very systematic and pre-planned, if you will, fashion, right? If you can do that, yeah, you can get rid of that cocaine addiction in your life.
Let me ask you this. You mentioned biological. So when you're taking cocaine, the neuronal patterns are being, how would you say, laid down.
Or laid down to,
Right,
yeah.
you're creating this
Carved,
neuronal habit of going to cocaine when a stressful situation comes, a time of loneliness, whatever it is that
Yes.
induces you to that substance. So once you've conquered cocaine, is it possible to lay new tracks of neuronal patterns?
Yes, it is. And that
That
is
answers that. Thank you very much.
Very well, thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Show's over.
Yeah, the scientific evidence really shows us throughout, especially nowadays with what we believe, the functional MRIs can teach us about the brain activities. When we lay down new neuronal pathways in the brain, as a result of that, what happens is brain activity changes. So regions of the brain that have remained dormant and didn't really get activated as part of a, let's say, decision-making process, they now become activated. Okay, so that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is a simple analogy. If you can think of, you have always driven to work, taking very set, predetermined, plan or map or route, such as a certain street, certain stoplight, certain turns that you have taken, and then habitually you're kind of programmed to take that over and over and over again until one day you decide, maybe I'm going to turn left at that stop sign and take the next street down and turn right on the second street instead of this one. Maybe I'm going to do that. Maybe I'm going to take that and see how it changes my arrival time. How it changes perhaps as a result of my earlier arrival time, maybe also my day, because I started work on time or earlier or later. I'm going to observe that. Same way, when you say we are laying down neuronal pathways in our brain, a person may have found themselves at time of stress when they are, let's say, suddenly overwhelmed by an unexpected event, and then they sense that urge inside that I should use, or now it's a good time to use some cocaine to kind of bring my mood up to deal with the situation and get some courage, because the cocaine is a stimulant. So you would use it in order to get some better mood or heightened level of energy or excitement to take care of a problematic situation, perhaps overcome some or overlook some obstacles or even dangers, but remain focused on the opportunities and the positive outcome that you want to achieve. If that is coming up as an urge and maybe even a composite of memories and experiences and a goal-directed, goal-driven mindset, you can certainly engage in that and go use the cocaine and basically let's run the script through, and then you go and take care of your business. But then also that after I have used, there's going to be, if I don't use more, it's going to be a crash. Because when I take a stimulant and that's upper, is taking my mood up and gives me energy and heightened excitement, it's not sustainable unless I add more of this substance to my system.
That becomes a problem.
That becomes a problem. So if I'm at one point of time, let's say 10 hours down the road, 12 hours, 24 hours, 3 days down the road, I've stopped, I'm not using, then boom, that whole excitement that was kind of the top of the wave is going to crash down, and I sense that, right? I'm going to feel it in more or less a, if you will, a package of, depression. I'm going to feel depressed, sad, hopeless, helpless, lethargic, tired, not interested or excited or motivated, lack of motivation, right? And a lot of gloominess, if you will, to myself, right? So I know that's going to happen after my success. That's whole script that I can envision. And what if right there, what I could do is say, wait a minute, what about not doing that? How about not taking that step? How about what is the worst thing that can happen if I don't use cocaine? Maybe I'm going to go into that meeting, try to face this issue, and maybe I'm going to fail. Okay? Maybe I'm not going to get that contract. But at least I'm not going to have that crash down the road anymore. At least I'm not going to feel again depressed and hopeless and helpless. Maybe there's going to be another solution. Okay? So if I kind of pause right in there and then, in that moment, and I tell myself, let me take another approach, another route, that's what we mean by that laying down the neural pathway. That's different than what used to be, right? I'm just kind of taking a more directed approach toward my goal that has nothing to do with my old habit, and basically open up the opportunity for a new habit to form. Because here, when I'm opening up that opportunity of, let me try something else, then hopefully I can also take action on it. For instance, that's what people learn through going through treatment. Well, you know what? I could talk to someone whom I trust. So if there is a problem I'm facing, instead of facing it with cocaine use, I'm going to face it with a different route. I'm going to go and talk to somebody I trust and see what ideas they have. Okay, that would be one option. And that option has sub-options available. For instance, who is that person that you trust? You could talk to your therapist. You could talk to a parent. You could talk to a sibling, even in older generations, to an adult child who is supportive. You could talk to a sponsor that you have established in the past, for instance, a 12-step sponsor. You could talk to an attorney, perhaps. Let's say if the issue that you're struggling with has legal components associated with it, maybe a trusted attorney can put some good options in front of you. Maybe it has to do with finances. You could talk to a CPA or a financial advisor. Maybe it has to do with some social issues. So maybe you talk to a social advocate, right? Again, so if you take that alternative route to medication or substance use, right, then you're taking an action that if rewarded, if that action actually translates into success and rewards you with the success that you've been looking for, then that by itself can be a new habit formation. The next time around, when you're facing that stress, you remember, your mind remembers, you know what, last time, instead of using cocaine, I went and talked to an expert and it solved my problem. And it didn't have that crash associated with it.
Let me ask you this, because it sounds like to me, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, cocaine is one of many tools, right? And I mean, we can use cocaine, we can use marijuana,
right?
And it boils down to the person not having the skills or the coping abilities to be able to handle a stressing event.
In general, yes.
So we have a stressful event, whether it's economic, challenges, abuse at the home, getting laid off at work.
Right.
All of a sudden, you look in your tool chest. What do I have to be able to deal with this?
Yeah.
And it looks like they'll grab cocaine or marijuana or whatever it is. But you're saying, get rid of those tools. We'll give them new tools.
Right.
And that'll help you
Yes.
on the path of getting rid of addiction.
Yeah, that's the principle. Let's replace the other tools with new tools that are functional and productive. They're constructive. They're also manageable. You see, if a person has replaced cocaine use, for instance, with their own self-efficacy, that means a strong belief and confidence in themselves, right? That I can deal with this situation and I know how to, by, for instance, in this example, reaching out to an expert. And that is rewarding in and of itself, because not only do I get what I want, but also as a result of this collaboration with an expert, I feel much more better about myself, that I have the ability to engage in these types of constructive strategies in my life to influence the outcome of my actions. Then I have learned a strategy that, like I mentioned, is productive because it got me to my success. It's constructive and it is manageable, because at any given time I can increase it as much as I want or decrease it. I can talk to 2 experts, 10 experts, 20 experts, or I can take a break from that, and none of that will have some side effects. They will not control my life. The experts are not going to be knocking on my door and saying, well, you better take this or I'm going to give you hell. But that's what cocaine does. You better take me or I'm going to give you that depression that you don't like, because I'm a stimulant. If you don't take me, I'm not going to give you excitement. So they're in control. They're in charge. But if I have made my choice in, again, rewarding myself, getting to the outcome that I want, in, let's say, addressing a huge issue in my life by, in a very constructive, productive, manageable way, then, you know, I am in charge. It has less side effects, if you will, and really no side effects. What would be a bad side effect of contacting an attorney and getting them involved in helping you with a contract and you know, ending an agreement after the contract is over? What would be the bad side effect? I mean, you have to pay some money.
$395 an hour. Yeah.
$395 an hour. But is that a
effect.
side effect, or is that part of your agreement, part of your plan? You hired them, right?
But so if we go back, so a counselor, a therapist, or psychologist like or as yourself, you're like a mental hardware store, in a sense.
You could say that.
Come to you.
Yeah.
I need tools to help me overcome this issue. Which ones would work for me?
Right.
And then you can tell them.
You can tell. Yeah, you could.
But building that house is going to take a while.
Yeah, building, exactly. Very good point that you brought up. So I can't expect me to go to Home Depot and talk to an expert at Home Depot, give me a few tools, and then overnight I would have a beautiful house.
You got to start the foundation.
Yes.
You got to get
Put the
special
hard
tools
work
for
in.
that,
Yes.
which you guys have.
Right.
And where do we go for this, by the way?
Well, we thank
We'll
our
take a break for
sponsor.
that, yeah.
Yes, Elite Care Treatment is available to answer your questions. You can reach them by going to the website elitecaretreatment.com, as well as calling 888-511-0607. If you know of someone that you would like to refer to a treatment center, if you would like to get more answers to your questions, and also Therapy Cable, you can send us info@therapycable.com. Send us an email to that address, info@therapycable.com, and we will be glad to answer your questions.
And we'll back to the house analogy. So we laid the foundation down. There's tools for every different part, every different level, or every stage of building that house, right? When you get to the windows and whatnot. And I guess the lawyers, the financial advisors, whoever you may need are different experts. They may be the curtain guys, maybe the interior designer. So there's a group of people you can use for that. So that's fascinating. So that we really can build that house. It can solidify them from getting issues in the past.
Right.
What is it? Do we have the numbers by chance of what is like the relapse rate?
It's very high.
Is it high?
So yes, that's a good question. So generally, if somebody is addicted to prescription meds or illicit drugs, or even gambling, sex addiction, other types of like overeating, etc. Generally, but specifically when it comes to alcoholism and substance use, without any treatment, relapse is huge. Is 99%. People just relapse. That means they continue, even if they stop on their own strong will. Like after maybe they can stop for a few days. Some people can venture out and do actually a few more, like a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months. Some people are really brave, and there's a life-changing event in their life that kind of propels them, compels them to really stop for a couple of years. But then another life-changing event can take them back. But ultimately, there's always relapse. Basically, 99 to 100% of addicts who don't do anything about this addiction, they always relapse. That's how more or less the addiction continues, right? Because, I put it in this framework rather than saying, well, an active person in an active phase of their addiction, they always plan on continuing the use. That's not always the case. Because of those side effects. You see, when people go through these ups and downs of their active addiction, they hate it. It's not like they're planning to continue that harmful, painful experience of addiction. They're not planning that. They would love it to stop, but they just kind of are helpless toward it. And that's that disease phenomenon, because an addict's brain is dysfunctional. It is, in a disease state. You can't rationalize or think or reason correctly. You can't, right? Therefore, in their active disease stage, they are simply overwhelmed by these repeated urges to fall back into those escape mechanisms, escape from pain. So that's why I mentioned that relapse in that state is very, very high, because they don't actively plan to continue their addiction. They hope and try to get out of it, but it doesn't work. So ultimately, every few days, every few couple of weeks, every few months, they relapse. And they don't do anything about it. Now, when we change that into, let's say, the next stage of recovery, which would be a simple, mere 12-step model, okay? If a person decides, you know what, I'm going to go to AA meetings from now on. I'm going to take that route and nothing else. So I'm not going to seek therapy. I'm not going to get medication to replace my substances. I'm not going to go to a treatment center. I'm not going to go to a recovery center. No, I'm just going to go to weekly or daily AA meetings. The chance for them to relapse is 90%. 90.
Wow.
Only 10% of individuals, more or less, kind of a ballpark, the 10% of individuals who only utilize AA meetings can remain sober for the rest of their lives.
Wow.
Only 10%. Now, if you add another component to it, and add another of these tools out of the toolbox, then the chance increases. So, for instance, let's say you add in therapy. If they do the AA meetings on a daily basis, but also they seek individual therapy, the chance can go up to 40-50%.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yes,
It's a big change.
Yes, and then you that's just individual therapy. Well, and it depends on what study you're reading. Some studies show 20%, some show 60%. But on average, it's known about 40% on ballpark. So it goes from 10% to 40%. 40 out of 10, or 40 out of 100, or 4 out of 10 people can remain sober for the rest of their lives, given only these two components: daily AA or NA or 12-step meetings and individual therapy. Now you add family therapy to it, it increases even more. I don't know the exact numbers, but it goes to up to 60%, 70%. And in fact, for dual diagnosis cases, where the issue is not just substance use, but there's an underlying condition such as past history of trauma, abuse, or current depression, or bipolar, or let's say psychosis, or other types of ailments that are present. It could even be a medical condition such as hypoglycemia, or diabetes, or cardiovascular problems, blood sugar level, deficits, autoimmune system, pain-related disorders like, let's say, fibromyalgia or MS or even age-related problems such as, let's say, dementia or Alzheimer's. You add, and then personality, more or less longer enduring personality traits.
How about religion? Does religion play a part at all?
Hi, welcome to Adelante. This is Adelante Recovery, and my name is Yvette Kuglin, and I'm part of the staff.
Adelante Recovery Center has helped people in dual diagnosis for 5 years. We accept most PPO insurances and provide luxury accommodations and 24-hour support. To speak with an admissions counselor, call 1-888-242-4450.
A lot of time we don't even know what's wrong with us, and sometimes we need to get away to figure that out. So if you want to go for a little retreat out in Corona del Mar, which is a confidential location, we're here to help. So we're only a phone call away. Thank you.
Religion, too, is providing what individual therapy or family therapy or support system could provide. Religion depends what kind of a denomination you are in, what kind of activities that particular denominational school or organization is providing, such as, is it a weekly mass they go to, or a weekly activity, maybe social reintegration, or helping the community, or again maybe even religious couples counseling, for instance, right? Or family reintegration into the family. There are lots of different things, depends on what religion is doing what, right? What kind of activities they're doing for that person. But if a person seeks a religious guidance and they're religious and they believe in the words that they're receiving, then surely it can be very successful, because either it has an individual impact on them where they feel stronger internally, that they tap into some areas of their belief system. Maybe they had been very ashamed of themselves for many, many years, and through the religious connection they can basically tap into that source of the shame and get rid of it. Maybe they can put a cap on it. Maybe they can seek some healing or resolution through that religious connection that they make, either through a mediator, if you will, to their God, or directly through almost like a direct channel between the person and their own creator. Some people do that by confession. They confess, they're done with it. It just was weighing heavily on them, on their shoulders, because they have kept a secret with themselves for many, many years, and suddenly through the confession that burden lifts, and then there is something that comes up from within of the person that ties into the religious teachings that say, you know what, I confessed, I'm free of that sense of, let's say, shame or guilt. Now I feel like I'm reintegrated into the society. I want to help. I want to be a part of this life, this world, this group, this society, these human beings around me. That can be very helpful, and that would be an additional component that would help a person remain sober rather than relapse.
Because I was thinking a couple of things as you were talking there. You reminded me of certain things. We'll pick Catholicism here and evangelical Christianity, because I think that's like 75% of the country is either Christian or Catholic in one sense or another. That's another argument for another day, whether they're the same or not. But for instance, Catholicism, they'll pray to Mary. They'll have a statue of Mary. But there's like an assistance there, right? It's a transcendent being, if you really believe it. Yes. It's a transcendent being that can help you. Yes. And the evangelicals will always tell you that. Right. They'll say, let me handle your problems. Right. that's God talking. I'll take care of it. Just let it go.
Yeah.
And to me, that would sound like that's not a bad thing to tell an addict if they truly believe that God can handle it.
Yeah.
Because it kind of gives them a little bit of a respite from that burden, as well as using the tools from a therapist and other groups. Is that true? You think?
That is very true. That's very true. And again, it has to match a person's core belief system. If, let's say, someone comes from a completely non-religious background where they don't believe in such a thing, that there is a higher power. For instance, an atheist who has grown up in an atheistic family, where the teachings from early on have been aligned with, nature is what nature is. Everything has a scientific base. There's nothing going on in terms of a higher God or power out there that's invisible, and none of these stories and stories, basically, more or less, or beliefs matter. So all you need to believe in is yourself, and it's more the law of physics, chemistry, physics, biology that matter, and math, more or less, right? So if that's the case, and they have grown up with this type of mindset, it would be completely useless to try to convince them to turn their burden and their pressure and their feelings and emotions and the pain they're experiencing to somebody else. They would be flabbergasted. It's like, what are you talking about?
Sure.
This is not what I believe in. I think I'm in charge of certain things. I have to take responsibility for that. There's nobody else who would take my burden. There's no invisible power out there. So what do I do? Right? And vice versa. So it has to match the belief system. If that's their belief system, we give them a key to that lock that doesn't match, it's not going to work. And vice versa with the people who are religious. So basically, whatever the actual religion is, they believe in a higher power. They believe in a higher ordinance, higher order to things, higher organization and principles that transcend one person. It's more about the whole, let's say, community as well as entire world is functioning according to certain principles, right? Then certainly it would make sense if we speak that language and we also can explain the dynamics of this burden shifting within that framework. If we can tell them, well, this is how you can deal with this burdensome emotional intensity. You can turn it over to the higher power. And it works with them because it matches their belief system.
And that would increase the possibility of them
To remain
recover.
sober. Absolutely.
Interesting stuff. Well, we got a few more questions we want to take here in the remaining minutes. There's an idea that came out, I don't know when exactly, you might know this more than I do, the idea of intervention.
Yeah.
A whole group coming in
Sure.
and saying, hey, Dr. G, knock it off, right?
Yeah.
Or Carlos, knock it off. Does that work?
Yeah, it works. Yeah, intervention definitely works, especially for situations where really I would say interpersonal influence and impact between the addict and their family members is in disarray. That means that really there is simply no influence anymore. There is no power anymore. There is no more no other level of influential or impactful interaction or method or approach that would ultimately convince the addict to seek help. So if the family members are powerless, they find themselves completely powerless because everything they have tried they haven't worked, and they haven't been able to change the course of actions of the addict. Then they are at a stalemate, more or less. They're at a state where they cannot completely get rid of this person from their lives, or they don't want to for whatever reasons. And also they're completely useless, if you will, because they're helpless. Because when they're helpless, what kind of a use are they?
Sure.
Can they implement? There's no use, So they're ultimately in a stalemate. It's like, it's a catch-20, right? You cannot do anything about it. So that is where the interventionist can come in and help out with a set of very specific set of guidance, direction, and solution.
Guidance, direction, and solution.
So instead of the family, instead of the addict trying to conjure up some ideas and solutions to the problem, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to do, because they have tried everything, nothing has worked. So, and especially it goes back to their, the sense of enabling one another and codependency. And that has led to that stalemate and the maintenance of the problem. So the interventionist comes in and says, you know what, let me detangle, right? This entanglement, this knot. Let us just take the pieces apart. Nobody is going to think about solutions except me. If I'm the interventionist, I'm going to go there with an action plan. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take something like this and put like 20 steps together. I'm going to say, Dr. Carlos, this is how we're going to help you. Now, step number 1, this is what you got to do. Step number 2, this is what your family members got to do. Now, step number 3, this is what the person of interest has to do. Right?
So you have to structure it like that.
Yes, the interventionist sets the structure. That's that guidance. That's that direction. And then with an action plan to follow. So it all has to start with some education of all the members involved. Usually the addict is not part of it because either they're absent or they're not in the right mind or they would bolt at the very first sign that there is an interventionist there, right?
Really? Yeah.
So, or sabotage the whole system. So you wouldn't approach them yet, but introduce the concept to all the family members, answer their questions, explain the situation, help them understand why things have not worked, help them see how they have enabled the addict in the past and how they have to really stop their dysfunctional or less useful, less effective methods of interaction. And then we would have a meeting, family meeting, including the addict, to really kind of create a pivotal point where we can mediate some discussion and communication between the family members and why it is important to these family members to get this addicted person the help that they need. And a lot of that can come from that preparation phase where the interventionist sits down with the family members of an addict and says, let us prepare a story, a narrative, a list of reasons why you would want to have your family members seek help and get clean, right? And how this whole painful experience has been playing out for you. So they sort out through all that, through the preparation phase. They come down, have a family meeting, which is more or less known as that confrontation. So basically they confront the addict and tell them, okay, this is it. This is the day where you have to make a life-changing decision to either completely leave the family and be done completely, or because they cannot handle it anymore. So this is one option. Or really seek help with the help of the family, supportive, in a very supportive fashion, and follow through with a recovery plan that usually includes admission to a treatment center immediately after that meeting. And that's why when you see the interventionists who go into families, there's that series or movie about intervention, right? That shows people go in, confront the family, and then everybody has something to say, and then usually there's a change of heart. In most cases, there's a change of heart on behalf of the person who is addicted, who gets the message, who actually kind of can resonate with the painful experience of the family and their own, and feel supported in their moving on toward treatment and healing rather than disconnection from everyone and just kind of dying off, more or less, sooner or later.
And my last two questions were related to this because we were going to ask you, how do family members approach an addict? So this is one way of doing it, is the intervention. Do you think this is the best way? Or are there other ways that are just as good in regards to a family member or somebody approaching an addict to get help?
I would say the best way, it really usually incorporates some consultation with an expert in the field. So there are multiple options available. Family members of people who are addicted to some kind of substance, prescription meds, or other things, they can seek consultation, to therapy, talk to a psychologist, psychotherapist, addiction specialist, and get some advice. And the one way would be that, to just how to broach the subject, how to deal with the person who is in their life and who is addicted, how to pay attention to their own, processes they engage in terms of those dysfunctional enabling approaches and habits that they have. To kind of reduce the harm at home, to reduce the harm in their discussions and communication, to learn better, more communicative, more effective communication skills, to remain connected with their loved one. And so that's one of the approaches, to just seek consultation. The other one is surely, if nothing else has worked, they have tried a lot of different things, and you see they're at the verge of really just cutting everything off because they cannot handle it anymore. Sure, an interventionist would come in handy to help the person move forward to a treatment center. Another way, if the connection, the communication between the family member and the person who is struggling with the addiction is at a level that is, trustworthy, reliable, there's some deeper rapport, bond, and connection, without this discussion escalating into misunderstanding, miscommunication, even strife or conflict, or even violence. So if it can really be completely contained within a very loving, caring, understandable sort of situation, which is super rare, maybe 1 in a million, that's another approach. Is just sitting down with your loved one and say, listen, I am here for you. We got to do something about this. Let's do this together. Let's go get help. That's another option. However, that requires that the addict is actually in that mindset to be open to getting help. If they're not, if they're far away from that mindset that getting help is good, getting help is necessary, getting help is functional, that's going to backfire, right? So going back, yes, intervention is not a bad choice. It's a pretty good choice. But mostly, in most cases, seeking help from a consultant, from an addiction specialist, from an expert.
Let me just clarify that last point. Seeking help. Who's seeking?
The family member.
Oh, the family member.
Yeah.
Okay.
Calling. That's why we are always promoting one of our sponsors. Their lines are open. You can always call them, and you can call anybody else you like.
Tell them who our sponsor is.
We will tell them. But yeah. I want to again mention, we are trying to be quite unbiased here. It's not about just one company matters, one organization matters. No, there are 800 lines. There are lots of local services, county services, state services, federal services, church services. Free therapy services, community mental health services. There's so many different things available everywhere in the world. The point is, you have to just reach out, call a hotline, call a therapist, go to your church, go to your boss, go to another friend, ask for questions, ask for advice. Tell them, I'm struggling with this problem, I need help. Do you know of someone that can refer a person, a psychologist, a therapist, an addiction specialist to me? If you can do that, ask them questions. What would you recommend? You go, and we can even go and have a session, individual consultation session with an addiction specialist, and get some advice on how to approach the situation, and advice on how to talk to the addict, advice on how to motivate the person to seek therapy and recovery.
Fabulous stuff. Dr. G, we have covered the addict in all different angles.
We did.
We looked at a lot of different perspectives.
Absolutely.
And I hear we're actually moving in a different direction soon. Our tips and tools, or
our tips and tools for next couple of weeks, we will definitely focus on the varieties of substances, illicit drugs, as well as prescription meds. We're going to cover that first.
Great.
To go into what are stimulants, what are depressants, what are anxiolytics versus antidepressants, antipsychotic, hallucinogens, and all kinds of goodies around these, both again prescribed versus illicit drugs. And then after that, we may get into actually inviting some people to our studio who work in the field. That's what I would like to do is recovery workers, drug and alcohol abuse counselors, psychologists and therapists, clinical workers, nurses,
people who have their boots on the ground.
Nurses, people who have boots on the ground, to come and share with you some of their experiences, some of their challenges in life. So that's what we are hoping to do.
Are we also going to look at specific types of addiction, like gambling addiction, or sexual addiction? We'll
Sex addiction, yes, absolutely. Separately, we will look at those. And that brings to mind that our sponsor again, who you can reach out to, Elite Care, elitecaretreatment.com, 888-511-0607. And we have lots of good stuff.
I can't wait.
Wonderful.
This is exciting stuff. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this episode. There's so much coming up. I'm excited. I hope you are too. Tips and tools on therapycable.com. Once again, we thank our sponsor, Elite Care. Thank you, everyone.